Hi, my name is Bill DeYoung. I'm senior writer and editor at the St. Pete Catalyst, which if you know me pretty much means that I'm taller than everybody else in the office. That's kind of all it means. This is the Catalyst Sessions. Thanks for joining us today. I'm so happy to introduce you to my friend, Roland Kent LaVoie, who is also known as Lobo, who had a lot of huge hit records in the day and has a really strong connection to St. Petersburg and the whole Bay Area. Kent, hello.
Hello, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing fine today. You're still in Florida somewhere, aren't you? You live in Florida?
Yeah, I still live down in Fort Myers in the wintertime, but right now I'm up in North Carolina. I've got a little cabin up here, and we've been up here, I guess 5 weeks now.
How's I don't want to say how's COVID been treating you, man, but I mean, you coming through it okay?
Well, no family members sick, and my kids, are the Donald Trump generation that they don't think anything can happen to them, and so they don't wear masks, they don't pay attention, and so far we've been lucky. Susie and I, at our age, we stayed in the condo for a long time, and then we just said to heck with that, and we came up here and stayed in the cabin. So we've been inside for 6 weeks or longer than that.
It's not fun for anybody. I'd like to turn the clock back a little bit and go over some stuff. Obviously, we'll talk about all the hit records and all the amazing stuff that happened to you over the course of your career. But I'd like to start with you're from Tallahassee originally, but you grew up in Winter Haven. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. My mother remarried, and my stepfather had a job. And we went over there, and that's where I stayed till I graduated high school.
So you're essentially a Winter Haven kid.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, okay. Famously, we always hear about this band that you were in with Stafford and Graham Parsons, which was called The Rumors.
No, we had a band. 4 different people had a band called The Rumors, and then they had a band called The Legends. And then after high school, when people started going different ways, there was a brief time we played 4 or 5 gigs. That's about all.
Okay, well, but you did play with old Graham for a while, and I think that's where people tick off the legend box and go, "Hey, man, what was he like? Was he Cecil back in those days?"
Graham Parsons was, at the time, he was a little younger than us, and he was very kind of introverted, and he would just sit there and stare at you. And that I found out later on from a girl that worked in the studio in L.A. where I was cutting some stuff, that knew him and did some sessions with him, said he was like that. And he was like Charles Manson for women. The women just fell all over him. He was a nice looking guy. He was less than dedicated to our band. Let's leave it at that. Just like he was less than dedicated to the Byrds,
Yeah,
leaving them hanging on the last day, that sort of thing.
Famously. So it wasn't like you can't look back and say, boy, Graham was a big pal of mine and we did some serious hanging out when we were teenagers.
No, he was really scared to death of him, because my deal was, let's learn the songs and play and get on down the road. And he was like, yeah, whatever, And so he was afraid I was going to, famously, the night that he was on his way to the gig and hit a cow with his Volkswagen bus, and he was late, and he came in the gig with his arm broken, and I made him unload the organ and play Palisades Park because we practiced it. And nobody else played that. And then he went to the hospital and got his arm fixed. He played it with one hand. That was probably the end of my Graham Parsons story.
He probably held it against you for the rest of his life too. Oh, that's Tell me about the Sugar Beats. This is where famously you come into Phil Gernhard's orbit. And we'll talk about Phil a little bit, obviously, but the Sugar Beats was your first sort of serious gigging club band, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was the first club band. And
yeah.
I was putting myself through St. Petersburg Junior College playing with a trio, playing cocktail music. And I met these guys, and they were playing Beale music in a house real near where I worked. And one Saturday night, they were all going to party. Whoops, you've gone away, or I've gone. There they are.
There they are.
That's you, buddy. They were over there at the house playing, and I was doing this cocktail music, and I just walked out of my cocktail job, which is also my living, and went and joined them. And then, within a month, we were playing jobs and stuff.
This was like 64, 65, though. It must have been.
This
the period where the Beatles hit everybody over the head and I'm doing this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this shot,
we wanted to be.
yeah,
We listened and played Beatle music.
this shot I think was taken at the Surfers Club, maybe out on Madeira Beach.
I really can't. That could be true because that's one of the few places that we played out that way.
Mm-hmm.
And we, Gernhard, I've told you the story, but Gernhard came in the club where we were playing in a place in Tampa, and we
Yeah.
played a song called "Would I Still Be Loving You," which is a big hit in Tampa for the rockers back in the '50s. I love the song, and he heard the song, and Phil was a song man, as we well know.
Yeah.
And he came up at a break and asked me where that song came from. Did I write that? And I said no, and explained it to him. And he introduced himself as a big producer, and I said, yeah, right, And then he came back a couple of weeks later and asked us to back up a guy who was going to put up some money to record something. And we got to the studio, and we were going to play for free, of course, and the guy didn't show up with the money. But the guy in the studio said, well, we're here anyway, if you can pay for the tape. And we cut this little record, which was a big hit in Tampa Bay area. And I can tell you how big of a hit it was. We used to make $60 a night. It was a going rate. And after, what was the name of What Am I Doing Here With You? We went to $300 a night.
That's a Johnny Rivers tune. Was that something you were playing in your sets in those days? That song?
Yeah, that's exactly. Phil said, work this song up. We didn't. I wasn't writing anything at the time, so there was nothing with original. And Phil was such a hustler. He went out and had the records printed up, went to radio stations, and I'm telling you, we went. All of a sudden, the Sugar Beats, everybody knew who we were, and so we fed off that for a couple of years.
I had that record on in the car coming down here to the studio today, and was thinking, I don't know how much you remember that record, but that guy singing it's a real cad. It's like, I got a girl I love back home, so what am I doing here messing around with you, baby? And that was,
Phil was a hit. Phil could figure a hit out, and he thought that was one. Where we screwed up on the record, the big screw up was we were hurrying to get it under 3 minutes because that was the golden rule back in those days. And we managed to squeeze it under 2 minutes because everybody screwed up. So the song's about a minute 57 long. It was fun, though. It was great fun, I can tell you that.
The B-side is called "Have You Ever Had the Blues?" That's a cool. They're cool records, Ken. They really are. Just both.
Well, you got to remember, this is absolutely the first time we ever, and I overdubbed all the harmonies and everything. Yeah. And it was "Have You Ever Had the Blues?" I think it's Lloyd Price. It was a flip side of one of his hits. And it's just a club song the band used to play.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Did Gernhard predict big things for the Sugar Beats? I mean, you got played on WLCY and the other station, I forget what it was called.
I can't remember them either, but there was all three stations. I mean, they hammered it because nobody locally had ever done a record before. Yeah. And it was big novelty, that we were actually some kids in St. Petersburg. No, he was trying to get something done, as he ended up doing, as we all know. Yeah. But at the time, he was trying to go to law school, and he was just trying to make ends meet. And I don't, as he said to me one time, and this is after I started writing songs, he said, you're an okay singer, and nobody would ever give you a hit. So the only way you're ever going to have a hit record is if you write it. Now, tell me that ain't the writing on the wall.
Well, that's also damning with faint praise, isn't it? Very, very Gernhard. Now, as I understand, you weren't really able to follow it up, didn't you? Remind me now. You went to the service, right?
Yeah, I was going to college at the same time, and then the music started kind of taking over. And I graduated from BC in St. Petersburg, and then I had to go back to South Florida, which is a different ball game. Those two schools are huge difference.
Yeah. And
we were playing 6 nights a week, and I had labs in the morning, all this stuff. And I was trying to avoid getting drafted at the same time because this is at the heat of Vietnam.
Oh, sure.
And I had arranged to get, this is when Phil and I really started working together. And I knew that if I was drafted and was gone for 2 years, it was over for me as far as doing anything in music. So I arranged to get in a reserve unit. And I got in a reserve unit. And they activated us. and sent us to active training for 6 months. During that time is when Phil had Snoopy versus the Red Baron.
Sure.
So when I came out, he was flush.
Yeah.
And he was a big producer, and that's when the whole thing started with me taking the songs down there every day.
Yeah. So you were living in St. Pete, and
Yep.
and Phil's office is in St. Pete.
Yep.
Tell me this story. Basically, you took to heart what he said. You got to write the tune, so you just started bringing him tune. This is after your experience in the reserves. You wanted a bigger and better taste of what you'd had before.
Well, Bill, I was very realistic. Okay.
Yeah.
I said, there was a guy in St. Petersburg, I can't remember his name, and his grandmother had left him this house and $50,000. And back in those days, he was like Fat City. So I said to myself, now, if I can do something with Phil that I can get $50,000 in my savings account when I was making $200 a week and interest rates are 10%, I'm going to have 50% more income for doing absolutely nothing. That was my goal, believe it or not. I mean, that would,
Yeah.
But it kept me centered because I didn't have grandiose ideas of doing anything other than writing that one song and getting that annuity. I mean, that was my incentive.
What were you going to do with the house? Just set yourself up and.
Yeah, just live in it. It was the idea was just this guy had this and he had it easy. And I said, well, if I can do this and have it easy, then shoot, why not spend a few years trying? And that's exactly, that's what I did. The strange thing about that is I used to call myself a mercenary songwriter because Phil was hammering into me at the time AM radio hits.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with making albums, had nothing to do with meaning of the songs or anything. Where music will get you, where it'll slap you in the face is you think you're just writing these mercenary, it's the wrong word, say that again. I mean, they may be mediocre too. But the idea of doing this and you think, well,
speak for yourself,
I'm just writing this fluff, and I'm just going to make some money, get on down the road. And now 50 years later, when you get emails from people in South Africa and Italy and all over the Orient about how still to this day they listen to that music and they connect to it because you can't really hide who you are if you're really writing songs. You know what I mean? And especially if they're on an emotional standpoint, you're really bearing your soul, whether you know it or not. And that's what I found out later on.
Well, before we go there, let me talk about your first solo record, which is Happy Days in New York City. 1969 was the year of the New York Mets. And if I remember correctly, and I do actually, spring training was here at Joan Payson Field in St. Petersburg. So there was a lot of Mets fever here as well.
Yep.
Was that the first song that Phil said? I think you told me that he would sort of reject songs. And was that the first one you came up with? He said, that's good. Let's record that one. Tell me about that song.
Well, once again, back up to what I said, that I was just trying to write a hit about anything. It made absolutely no difference to me. I wasn't trying to prove anything except write a hit. And this thing with the Mets, as you just said, and especially in St. Petersburg, it was a big deal, and everybody was caught up in it if you were a sports fan at all.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it hit me that, that maybe I could write a song about that. And so I wrote the song, I took it down there, and then I found out what it's like to have somebody excited over a song. I mean, 2 weeks later, I was in New York recording with the top musicians at the time, the string section playing live. I mean, it was just the most wonderful thing I had ever done when they overdubbed strings on that. And I'm sitting there listening to it, and I'm about crying, because it's just so, this is the big time. And then all the Mets had to do was win the series, and I was going to have a smash. Then they won, and that was the end of that. It was never heard by anybody.
It's a cool record. I love the B-side too, which is called My Friend Is Here. And that's where you overdubbed a lot of harmonies. And I'm looking at 1969 and going, it's very singer-songwriter. It's almost a forerunner of what Lobo became. And there's the sort of Crosby, Stills, and Nash 3-part element to it, which I thought was very cool. Probably a better song.
Let me interject something here.
Okay.
It was not me doing the harmonies. It was, remember the Left Bank that did Walk Away Renee?
Oh, sure.
It was those kids, and they came in and sang, and I was just amazed that somebody had a hit record was going to sing on my song. And that My Friend Is Here song, Phil said, that's a B-side. You do whatever you wanted to. So me and those guys got in there and started messing around with it, and we had more fun. And I still get every now and then I get something, someone that has a Christian angle asking me if this, because there's a line in there that said "had a lunch with Christ."
Oh yeah,
and it was a drug song. My drug song. I was never a drugger. So this My Friend Is Here, meaning the drugs were available, and that was all in my imagination because I was never a drugger. Never had anything to do with it.
Well, okay. I mean, truth be told, that record sunk like a stone too, and the Mets notwithstanding. But you kept bringing songs to Mr. Gernhard. Why was Me and You and a Dog Named Boo the one? Why did that light his fuse, as they say?
I think what Phil would do, I think when he had something that he felt pretty strongly about it, he shipped it to Doug Morris immediately, who was the head of Big Tree, who ended up being a huge man in the business.
Yeah.
And I think he got the same reaction from them. And there was one more session before that I went to New York. We cut 4 really just demos. Mm-hmm. And there, nothing ever came of, I don't even remember what the 4 songs were, but
yeah.
But with Me and You, I'll tell you one thing about Me and You and a Dog Named Boo. We had it, I had written it, and we were going to record it. And he had this other group that he really was hot on. I think the name of them was Duck Butter.
Butter. Oh, sure.
Remember? Okay. They were going to New York to record these songs. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I went so that he could save money on the trip. And the musicians, they were going to use the same musicians for both sessions. Also.
That's Phil. Yeah.
So Duck Butter, Phil said to them, learn this Me and You and a Dog Named Boo, because I just think it would be interesting. Well, they had a showcase for them, and all these big New York people there. And I was sitting back in the corner, drinking a beer, seeing what was going on. And they came up to where they played Me and You and a Dog Named Boo, and I felt like, oh God, everybody's going to laugh at that song, and because it was so, weird. And they played the song, and at the end of the session, and they played all these things they were going to record. At the end of the deal, all the people hung around. And they were all talking to Phil, and everything buzzing. And I said, well, boy, they must have liked that group. And then after everybody left, Phil came over. I said, man, that worked real good, didn't it? He said, well, yeah. But the only thing they wanted to know about was your song. So everybody that heard the song thought it was a hit, including all the reviewers. And first time it was played, it was just a week after it was out. Phil called me, and his famous words, not infamous, famous words to me was, I answered the phone, and he said, it's a smash. And I said, what? I don't know what he was talking about. He was talking about a huge record order out of Chicago based on WLS playing it, which is the first station I ever heard it played on, by the way.
Yeah.
In Chicago.
WLS.
In Tampa.
Yeah. At nighttime, you could pick that up all over the show.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Let me ask you, and it's just to get it on the record, Kent, there really was a dog. Was that line came from? I mean, it's just a cool hippie line you came up with.
No. This is where life is stranger than fiction. I was sitting with my guitar. I had the da traveling, living off the land.
Yeah.
And I was trying to being proper. I was going to you and me, and it was you and me and a dog named, or it wasn't a dog, it you and me and trying to be free and all this crap. And I'm sitting in it. There's a sliding glass door, okay, in the room I am, and I flipped it around. It was me and you.
Yeah.
And the dog comes around the corner. It's a German Shepherd, and sits there looking in at me. And I said, there's an idea. And that's how, I mean, it's just strange. You know, I mean, that's the way it happened, though.
This was your
And
dog? Was that its actual
yep,
name, or was that poetic
yep,
license?
yep. It was a German Shepherd, and her name, it was a she, and her name was Boo, like she's scary. And she was the most gentle German Shepherd you've ever seen in your
Yeah.
life.
It is amazing where things come from, and you know, I'm a few years younger than you, not too many. I reckon I was in junior high school when that record came out, and I think that I think it captured something, you know, in that sort of kind of ersatz sort of freedom thing that hippies were on about. Even somebody as young as I could see that it was like, that's a lifestyle that I could really enjoy. You know, of course, none of us could enjoy it ultimately, and we all ended up buying houses and stuff. But in those days, I remember there was a certain sense of freedom in that. Tell us about the name change and why you didn't go out
Well,
under your own name as you had before.
you know, we've talked at length about Phil Gernhard and his ego problems and all sorts of things. And I like I told you when you did that book, and we were talking about, when I had heard that he killed himself, it didn't surprise me one bit. I mean, I knew him real well. He was haunted by a demon, and we were sitting talking. And he said, you know, we put that other record out under your own name, and you don't want to have a negative connotation and all this blah blah blah. So we're going to have another name. And I said, but you know, worked for me. So I just started writing down names, and one of them that was on the list was Lobo. And when I said it, he said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "Well, it's Spanish for wolf." He said, "That's cool. That's, you know." And once again, then he called New York and said, "How about this?" And they all loved it. The reviews of the record, I could tell you, everybody reviewed the record, and they one of them said they called picaresque. I think it was an odd. I
Yeah.
had to look it up in the dictionary. You know,
Yeah.
it meant rural and all this stuff, and they commented on the name. So once again, Phil had that knack of how to steer things the right way.
It made you mysterious, you know.
Well, you know,
Who is Lobo?
I was a group for 2 years, and I never said anything. When you don't do any press and you're not out there, you don't tour, people just think what they want. I was a Canadian Indian for a long time there. You know, they never named the tribe, but I went right along with it. I had a song called Running Deer on one of the albums, because then they were sure I was an Indian. Whatever, you know, I had dark hair and all that stuff. You know, when you're not really in it to become a celebrity or become a touring act, you just let it dissolve into the network of life. And that's what it did. I never had any name value as far as people. It's funny. I was recognized in the United States as someone saying to me, "Are you Lobo?" In 50 years, one time. And the guy was from Hong Kong and had seen me in a show over there. I have never been recognized, and that's probably me not wanting to be out there. And so that, you know, it was part of the whole deal. And Phil let it go, and he really did not push me to become more than I was. We just kind of let it ride, you know.
Did you tour though? I mean,
a little bit.
I got a TV clip. I'm trying to figure out how to show here just for a minute. And but you did live shows. Did Phil put you with a band and send you out, or how'd that
No,
work?
yeah, we did. Yeah, we the first time I went out, we just took the guys I played with here, and we went out. We all got in 2 trucks and drove, and it's just like, you know, beating your head against a wall for $1,500 a night. You know, that was a good one. The small one was $700 a night. That sort of stuff. And that's what you need to do to build up an album buying public, is be out there. And I was out there a little bit, and I started getting these writers checks in, and they were a heck of a lot more than going out there and playing the Holiday Inn in Dubuque, you know. And so I just slid right out of it, and I didn't do it for years until the end of the 70s, when I was asked to go to Asia.
Yeah.
And that opened the whole. When I started playing for a crowd in Hong Kong, 5,000 people, and they sang every song with me, and I said, "Uh-oh, this is a different ball game." They knew every song, and that's why I toured so many years over there. I didn't play a lot. I'd play 8 or 10 dates, maybe every 2 years. But I enjoyed that because I never gave the States a fair try at it. I never sat there and played my own songs like I do over there.
Well, I Love You Want Me, I think was even a bigger hit, wasn't it, than
Yeah.
And
It
there
was, it was pretty much number one across the board. Going, in the States, in Billboard, we never got to number one because I can see clearly now. It kept us out for 3 weeks. But every other chart was number one, Cashbox, Record World, Easy Listening.
Isn't there a part of you inside, Kent, that says, I want to go out there and feel this adulation. I want people to go, I love your record. I love your music. I love what you're saying. And you weren't touring the States is what you're saying. And that cloak of anonymity behind the name and his Lobo group and all that must have gotten old after a while. You want to go out and, chase women around or whatever. The perks.
Well, what happened to that? I had a lot of that for the first, let me see, 3 or 4 years of it. And then I met my wife, the one, my second wife, not my first wife, good God. And unfortunately she did, but that's my first wife. And after Sizzy, I stopped chasing. That was the end of it, and we've been married, 44, 45 years, something now. And so, it's funny, with all the women that were available and around, I really didn't understand until I met her that there was someone out there that I would, love that much. And actually, my life after her was centered around her, not around the music, not around anything. Yeah. And we've lived, this quarantine's no big deal for us because we've lived this way for 40 years. I mean, we don't do things. We're very much homebody. We've been watching The Crown on Netflix. It's only 40 episodes. Great.
Yeah, I think we kind of wandered off after maybe the third season, but The Crown is great. The early ones I thought were great. Hey, listen, before I forget to bring this up, though, let's talk about this unholy triad of you and Phil and Jim Stafford. Because for all your credits in the music business that you have, you're also credited with not only kind of discovering Jim and bringing him into the forefront, but producing those records, co-producing Swamp Witch and Spiders and Snakes and My Girl Bill and all those things, which have a special place for people, certain people. I like a lot of them. I think Swamp Witch is a great record. Can you that's a great story. Can you tell us that story about when Jim said, hey, what do you think of this song? Didn't you tell me he wanted you to record it?
Well, he had gotten my number, or somehow or another, I don't remember exactly how. He called me one day and he said, listen, I've written some songs, and if you're ever over in Clearwater, if you'll stop out at the beach and just give me a shot. Anyway, so I was in Clearwater. We were doing a photo session for something, and for some reason or other, we went to Clearwater to do it. Mm-hmm. And my brother was with me. And I said, this guy Stafford, he'll bug me if I don't go out here and at least, listen to his stuff. And so I go out, and he's in this club, and it's in the daytime. And he's got his stuff up on the stage, and he had big speakers set up, didn't he? Yeah. And he said he played some song, some funky kind of a song. And I'm saying, oh, we'll have these songs and get out of here. And then the tape goes on, and he goes, wow, Blackwater had he lived back in the swamp with a strange green reptile. And I went, what? And he did it. We changed it a little bit, but I was just fascinated by it. There ain't no pride when you're trapped inside a slowly sinking ship. That's just great. And I said to him, Jim, this is really good. And he said, well, yeah, I think you could have a big hit on it. And I said, Jim, you don't understand. You're the one that needs to sing this. And that's how it started. I took him to Phil, and then we took him to Mike Curb, and Mike Curb came in the studio when I was there recording. And I went in the corner to hide from him because I always stayed away from all the big people. And he came in, and he introduced himself, and he said, listen, I really like the record you and Phil are doing, blah, blah, blah. And he said, listen, this Jim Stafford, Phil has pitched him. He said, do you really think that that he can have hit records? I said, there's something about him that, yes, I do, and it has nothing to do with me being his friend. I said, that was 10 years ago that we did anything together. I just think he's different. And, and Mike took him, and, that's where Phil and I started having trouble.
Yeah.
Because he got Jim on television, and I'll never forget the first time we were in LA and Jim was out there after he had Spiders and Snakes. And he was doing a showcase up at that Magic Castle up on the hill in LA, whatever you call it. Mm-hmm. And I go back, I get there a little late, and I get to go back in the back room, and he's sitting there talking to Tommy Smothers. And they're sitting looking at each other across this little table, and they both kind of stutter. And they're both funny, and they're both saying these funny things. And I'm thinking, Stafford could be a star that I never could have been, because he just kind of blended in, you know what I mean? And he was so funny. I mean, he did. I never knew he had any comedy. First time I saw him he said it was a stupid joke, but he started up and he said, I went out to this little church out in the woods, and I went in and sat down on a pew, but I went over and sat down in a pew. He said, but then I moved to a clean seat. And I'm thinking, it's just went by that fast. And I said, and I'm thinking, I laughed, I'm thinking, does he tell jokes? And then his whole show was this stuff. And I took it, and when I heard him do that, I dragged Phil and we went over there. I said, look at this guy. This guy's got a lot more depth to him than just, I don't like spiders, or
whatever.
Swamp Witch. I'm sorry, it was first. Yeah.
Swamp Witch, yeah. Oh, the whole story about how David Bellamy came into his orbit. And I've spoken with Jim about it too, that, he rewrote a lot of David's stuff, and he said, I think some of David's originals were better. And, and it's fascinating to talk to you and to Jim and to folks from that era now, looking back on it with hindsight. But you say this is when your relationship with Gernhard started to turn. Was it because he was devoting less time to your career, or
yes,
cheating you at that point?
but not only was he spending less time with me, he was excluding me from Jim. Mm. He just all of a sudden I wasn't informed about what was going on. My Girl Bill, first time I ever heard it was when we cut it. I never heard the song. I didn't know what it was about. And he started doing it. And I said, what the? And then he goes, she's my girl, Bill. And, I'm saying, oh, here we go, But no, Phil got, and that's when I made the fatal suggestion to him that, listen, and I was supposed to be, we were kind of loaded after playing and then drinking and late at night. And I said, why don't you take Jim? I'll give you my half of Jim. And you only have a couple more albums of me. Just release me. And the next thing I know, I'm on top of him on the floor, and I'm telling him, you don't want to do this, because I had my hand around his neck. I was going to bash his face in. Wow. Because I don't know how we got there, but I made the suggestion that was something other than what Phil had come up with. And that, in essence, is what we ended up doing right after that. And it was sort of the end of both of us. Oops, there he is.
Yeah,
my man.
Up there for you. Yeah.
Interesting guy. I never got to say to Phil, I'm going to say to Phil right now, to him, what I would have said to him had I looked him up in Nashville when I said, Phil, I don't want anything from you. I don't want you to listen to any new songs. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for giving me what I have. I'm sorry that I couldn't take you any more than I could. I could have gotten through a couple more albums and had a lot more to listen to now. But after the fact, I really appreciated his talent for knowing what a hit record was.
Do you think that had you not had that falling out over Stafford and money and all of the other things that go along with it, that you may have made more records together? Because you made 5 albums, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah,
I've gone on longer.
I don't really know. Well, here's how it ended. Mike Curb asked me to come up when I was in LA, to come up and have breakfast with him one morning. And I drove up in the hills, and Mike is a real private, he's real different. And we had breakfast. His butler brought the breakfast out on the patio, and we looked at L.A. and he did this long, pleasant about how Phil and I had done so well, and he thought that we could do a lot more than that, and aim me, because I didn't want to tour towards Las Vegas. And that was like saying to me, you're going to be the fourth guy going with the guys to the moon. It was so foreign to me. All I wanted to do was come back to Florida, get the heck out of LA, get a beer and sit on the beach. I had done what I wanted to do times 10. Yeah. And I really, all of this, even the attention and because I had brought him Stafford and Mike was sincere, and I believe they probably could have pulled it off had I wanted to do it. But I explained it to him. I said, Mike, I don't want to do any more of this. I can't mentally take it. I don't like walking in a room and people staring at me. And so he said, he was very understanding. He said, that's cool. He said, and I went back to Florida, and that was the end of it. I mean, as far as the big time, I asked to be released from his label when I still owed him an album, and I did do the thing with Bob Montgomery after that. That's not, I forgot about that.
There's a couple of singles I know from that era, but talk to me about Asia. I mean, that's amazing to me. And you referenced this earlier, but you also told me the story when we were doing the book about how incredibly you discovered there was another culture on the other side of the planet that thought you were a genius. Not that you're not, Kent, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, believe me, I know what I am. We went over there. We talked about it a little earlier. The strange thing about it was I did 2 nights in Hong Kong, the first 2 shows I did in Asia, and they were outside. There were 5,000 people within the place, and I don't know how many thousand hanging off of buildings, and I'm playing, and we're doing a couple of album songs. We'd always do covers because I was more comfortable doing those. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I realized they're all singing. Everybody in Hong Kong is singing these songs, and I'm thinking, and they're yelling something. I couldn't figure out what it was. I turned around to Thumpy the drummer. I said, what are they yelling? He said, they're yelling Stony. Yeah. I said, Stony? That was an obscure little song that I had on one of my albums. Yeah. It was just Stony, happy all the time. Well, I should have just taken my guitar and played it. I didn't know the audience that well, and I was afraid they would think it was. So we learned it the next day in the hotel, and we got the next night. It was the same thing, same venue, just different people. We got that song. We start down, and you could just feel it was like Led Zeppelin. And this is the funkiest song. They were singing this, and then I started reading about it. They call it campfire music in Hong Kong. They sit around little rooms and sing songs, and they play like they were around a campfire. This is the imagination. And the songs, my songs, were so simple, easy to play. They could understand what I said. They may not have understood it back in the early days, but they sure could feel the emotion and the melodies. And that's like, How Can I Tell Her, which is a song about cheating, which finally they figured it out. But that was the biggest song. That was the song. My wife was there the first show. Susie was with me. And she said, when I started singing this song, everybody was crying. I mean, weeping. And I'm saying, what? They all cheat on their wife or what? Yeah. Well, but they didn't understand what it was about. They just got the melody. Strange deal, you
played over there for a long time. You did a lot of gigs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. With the advent of that Malaysia airplane disappearing into the skies and never being found yet, I was on Malaysia Air a lot of time. I flew into Hong Kong in the cockpit of Malaysia Air when you just have to bank going down through the city. But that was when Billy the Aird's the guy that's traveled with me for years and years and sings background, does funny stuff on stage. Mm-hmm. I called him up and I said, now what would you think about that being the period on our touring? The end of the sentence. And he said he was a Vietnam guy, and would get claustrophobia on these flights and take stuff and go to sleep. And he said, that works for me. And the last show I did, they asked me to do a show in Toronto, just a little acoustic show. Billy didn't fly there. He drove from Nashville. Of course, Susie and I flew from Florida. Yeah. It's the last time I was on an airplane. It's the last time I will ever be on an airplane. So unless somebody approaches me with something I can drive from out of North Carolina in the summertime, I'll probably never do another show. I was too close to many incidents on planes that that's not my choice. I'd rather die of cancer in a bed than I would going down in a plane. It's just a horrible end of the story.
I'm going to put one more picture up, and I want to ask you a question while this picture's up. Hopefully it's there. Because we're just about out of time, but I wanted to ask you, looking back on it all, I mean, what's your kind of over and under on the whole career at this stage? What do you think about?
It was much more than I ever expected. And before it consumed me, I bowed out. And that was just all I could do. I wasn't capable of doing any more than I did, the good and the bad. I drank way too much in the 60s and 70s. 1980, I don't know, sometime in 8 days. It wasn't like a date I remember, but I stopped drinking, and that was the end of that. And I look back and I say I wish I'd had a little more patience to do a little more, not for the money or for the notoriety, but just the idea that I could have that many more songs in the network that which is the most important thing that I did, and that was the writing of the song. Besides that, I had no regret.
There's some great songs there. And the CDs are damn expensive. Do you know this? All the CDs of all those big tour albums have all gone out of print. They'll come back soon, but they're in this, because I'm a record collector, and you can't buy Calumet for $100. So if you got one, send it.
Yeah, it was just, it almost ran over me. It almost got me. And I managed to pull out, and I did it at the best time for me, and that was when I was on top, because on top for me, not on top, relatively speaking.
You did better than I did, my friend. You're a survivor in a good way, and you're still here to talk about it. Unlike Mr. Gernhard, who crashed and burned, as we all know.
Yeah, Jim Stafford's still going. I've talked to him recently. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to get him paid on some things that Gernhard never would have paid him, and the way that goes.
Well, that's the way it goes. Kent, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're still to playing gigs, there's an outstanding offer for you to come play the Palladium Theater in St. Petersburg. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, Bill, it was nice talking to you again.
It's
nice talking to you.
Good talking to you, buddy. We'll see you soon, okay? Take care.
Bye-bye.